Okay, this time it's recording. All right. So, hi, hello, welcome to the part whatever of the Marvel Rivals superhero character design bit that I'm doing here. Well, it's part 4. It's part something or other. Yeah. If I sound a little exasperated, it's because I already did this video. I did the whole thing from start to finish on the Discord as a live stream with people in the audience, because I figured, hey, it'd be nice to have some people along to sort of like in the chat, and then I can ask them questions about like comic lore stuff I don't know. That would be nice. That'd be fun. Have some people around to sort of like I do streams like that on Discord all the time. It is no problem. One little problem though is that when you are running Marvel Rivals, for whatever reason, the hotkey that I use to start and stop recordings in OBS, Marvel Rivals just takes control of it. Like it just like, so long as I'm in this window and I click that hotkey, nothing happens. It doesn't stop. It doesn't start recording. Doesn't do anything. So I spent 2 hours yesterday, 2 full hours, talking about this row of heroes and giving my impressions and all my thoughts, and it was not recorded. And because I was streaming it on Discord, like there's no VOD. Like Discord does not save that shit. Right. So I really should do it on Twitch, I guess. So that's just lost. That's just that's just gone now forever. So that was an exclusive version of that video for the, I think, 80 people who are watching with me on the Discord and hanging out in chat. So that's cool. That's great. That's lovely, wonderful. I'm deeply exasperated. It's not the first time something like that has happened to me. Like recordings get messed up sometimes. It's a peril of the job, right? But 2 hours of I felt so good. I had good energy. I was having fun. It was like it was really nice, and now it's just gone forever into the ether. And it's but it does mean on the positive side. Well, it depends on what kind of pervert you are. But on the positive side, if you are someone who feels like these videos get a little yappy and long, well, hopefully, theoretically, possibly, because I have already gathered my thoughts about all these characters, we can go through it a lot faster this time. This can be the concise, like brief, condensed, like really sort of like well-paced and good, and not endlessly yapping about all kinds of different things. This can be that version of one of these videos. Yeah, that's what's gonna happen now. That's definitely how this is gonna go down. That's definitely what I'm gonna do right now. Is I'm gonna do this short, condensed, brief, easily digestible version of okay, let me just slap my face and get put away the grumpiness, and let's talk about some fucking Marvel superheroes. And we'll start with Psylocke. Now Psylocke was she was a character that I was a little bit worried. I was a little like, oh, Psylocke, right. I was a little worried about her because she has a history, right? So if I remember correctly, Psylocke began her career as Captain Britain, which I think her superpowers were managed decline and transphobia, something like that. But she was Captain Britain at one point. I think her name was Betsy Braddock. It was some alliterative anyway, something. Then, blah, 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 comic book nonsense, blah, blah, blah. She became Psylocke for a while, and she had, I think, did she have psychic abilities back then? Certainly she had the butterfly imagery that's here. Then blah, 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 comic book bullshit. And then she got mind swapped, with her mind getting put into the body of a Japanese ninja assassin, I think, who was called Kwana, right? So as a white woman in an Asian woman's body, she was basically doing like Scarlett Johansson, like way ahead of time. Like I think Scarlett Johansson's whole career has been an homage. And that was basically, she was like for 29 years or something, like 20 or 30 years in the comics. The status comic book lore of her was that she was a white woman trapped in a Japanese woman's body, running around wearing like an extremely tight, sexy sort of 90s ass latex bodysuit, doing very sexy poses, showing off her ass a lot. That was Psylocke, right? Like a whole bunch of like, oh, that sure is comic books in the 90s and the 80s. That was Psylocke. So this version of Psylocke, I was like, oh, well, who the fuck is this then? Because that does not seem to be either of the versions of her that I know. And again, I read comics actively mostly back in like the mid to late 90s, early 2000s. Like that's the period of time when I was closely engaged with it, right? And Psylocke showed up there a lot. I think she had a thing with Wolverine going on at some point or another. And she was one of those kinds of characters. I feel like that's an image for later. We will need that for another thing. Let me see if I can't find some images of what Psylocke looked like back then. Apparently not that one. Okay, there we go. This is Psylocke, right? Like, that's the Psylocke kind of style that I remember. I think this one is like from the early 2000s or something like that. But that's very much the Psylocke thing, right? Like, this is a sexy ninja lady who's wearing an extremely skin-tight bodysuit, which is shiny so that it shows off like the curve of her ass and her titties, and that's a thigh going on. And that was sort of her thing. Is she like big sexy hair, and she was that, right? Like, that was Psylocke's function and reputation, and especially in the hands of some of the 90s comic book artists who like considered waists and the concept of internal organs like strictly optional when it came to female characters, and like who only really had one mode of posing them, which is like curvy, showing off their ass as much as possible, like trying to get their tits and ass in every shot. That was the vibe of it, right? Like, and it was a thing of its time, kind of tedious. So I was kind of happy to see, okay, this is clearly something else. Apparently, this is a past alternate reality version or alternate timeline version. I don't actually know if it's like a dimension thing, if she's from an alternate Earth or she's from an alternate timeline, or if she's just from the past. Who knows? Whatever. But she's a telepathic ninja known as Psy, who has devoted herself to striking down ancient demons and monsters. She's like hunting yokai, I think, is the conceit within her own comic books. And I don't think she's been in a ton of stuff. Like, I don't think this version of Psylocke has done a million things, but it's pretty cool that they chose that one as the representation for her in the game. Now, obviously, she also has the more classic costume in there, because, you know, it's Psylocke, you kind of gotta have that. But that's pretty cool. So, in terms of her character design, I'm a little bit in two minds about it, to some extent, because I like the, like, sort of medieval Tokugawa period, like whatever period it is she's supposed to be from, samurai aesthetic thing that she's got going on. She's got the Ronin thing, which is like having the one arm out of the sleeve of like the short kimono thing that she's wearing. There's a bunch of cool stuff going on here. It's also very much like ninja the stereotype, right? It's like pop culture ninja the stereotype, which is to say she's got the long red shinobi scarf, right? She's got the sword slung over her back. She's constantly standing in ninja poses, doing ninja posing things, and from what I can tell from her animation, it is pretty much just, yes, I am an honorable warrior from an ancient land. All of my actions are practiced and ritualized, right? It's, in terms of the way that she's presented, it is the archetype, and there's not really any deviation from the archetype, right? Like, it's just, this is like honorable ancient samurai ninja from the samurai land of samurai Japan, right? It's very much just that. And I'm a little bit like, okay, but if you're gonna do like a cool alternate history version of Psylocke, is like, could there be a twist on that? Could we have, like, could there be something of a thing, oh, that's cool. Again, they are bound by the comic books, right? Like, Marvel rivals can only do so much. They can only pick and choose different versions of the character that are already established by Marvel, so these flaws are kind of built in, right? But it is still one of those things that I just kind of go like, it'd be cool if, like, there was a little, if we're doing the alternate Psylocke, that there was like, oh, this is like a very specific version of it. So that's one thing. That's a nitpicky sort of thing. That's not really, again, Marvel rivals can't really do anything about that. That's not really up to them. It's just more of a general reaction, right? Then there's the character design. Because she's supposed to be old-timey ninja samurai from the ninja samurai period of Ninja Samurai Land, right? Like, because she's, like, steeped very specifically in these tropes and these archetypes out of Japanese pop culture, and certainly out of, like, Western pop culture interacting with Japanese pop culture, I'm sort of like, okay, I feel like it would have been cool if she then, like, the thing that makes her unique in the Marvel Rivals roster is that she's the only one who, like, looks truly medieval, right? Like, she's someone who looks like she comes from that time period. Because the thing is, she kind of doesn't. Like, all of these fabrics, these materials, all of this stuff that she's wearing, like, there is the patterned fabric of the kimono that sort of looks period accurate, right? Like, that's, like, and I'm not talking about, like, historical accuracy. I'm talking about if her outfit, her design, her character design was made from the materials from the fashion objects that were available to her in her own time period, right? Like, if she's supposed to be this alternate time traveler from the disparate past, why not give her clothes from that time period rather than, like, mixing and matching some old-timey aesthetics a little bit with just mostly modern materials, thick leather, factory-made things, right? Like, that just simply wouldn't have been part of her fashion or her aesthetic where she is, like, where she is from. Again, I don't know, maybe she also looks futuristic in the comics. That's entirely possible. Like, Marvel has done sillier things. It is just like, if you were gonna do the ninja thing, I would kind of have liked it for that to be, oh, that's Psylocke's thing, right? Like, that's the thing that makes her special amongst all of the other heroes in the game, all of whom basically are modern or sci-fi inflected in their aesthetic, right? Like, that's pretty much all of them have, like, this level of modernity to them. That Psylocke was the one who genuinely looked like she comes from, almost from a different genre, right? I think that would have been cool. Again, who knows if they would have been capable of doing that, but that, because otherwise, I feel that all of the modern aspects of her character design, all of the sort of industrial production, modern fabrics and stuff, I think that undercuts that part of her character, right? Like, that she's a woman out of time, right? That she is this person who's stuck in a world that is so different from what she knows and understands. Because that's where clothes can do storytelling, right? Like, and again, like, okay, so abandoning my criticism and taking this as that's just what the character design is, what would you read from that? Because what I would read from, here's a character who was transported from feudal Japan into the sci-fi future of whenever the fuck Marvel Rivals takes place, and that she's dressing like this now. This says to me, oh, she has been transported forward in time, but she has adapted to it and she has adopted it, and this has become very natural to her, and she's very comfortable and happy here because she's putting on the aesthetic, she's putting on the fashion, she's like mixing all of these new things into how she looks rather than hold on to her old-timey, her old-fashioned style of dress or the culture and style of dress that's from where she's from, right? So that would be how I would read this character design. The way that she's dressed, the way she's mixing all these modern materials in there is like, oh, she actually, maybe she's happier here in the future. Like, maybe if the future is like, oh shit, this is actually pretty cool. I like being here. That would be my read of it, right? And that's fair enough, again, if that is her storytelling. I don't really know how much to, like, she was ripped from her reality by the time stream entanglement and put on display by the collector, right? But, and like this, it says her new quest is to gather those heroes, end this conflict, and return home. And so, like, okay, if she's someone who yearns for home, right? Like, who really wants to go back to the world that she knows, who, like, longs for it, who's like, nostalgic for it, I would reflect that more in the fashion. I would make her, like, that's the thing, like, you know the old saying, like, no one is more Irish than an Irishman who isn't in Ireland, right? Like, it's like the further away from Ireland you go, the more Irish an Irishman becomes, right? That thing, like the diaspora experience of, like, being separated from your home culture that causes you to hold on to things that you would normally, like, find trivial or unimportant. Like, these things become more important to you. You hold them closer to your heart because they remind you of home. That's what I would look for in a character design like this, is like some aspect of, like, oh, she's actually really desperately holding on to the relics of her past life, like of the world that she came from. So I would look for, like, if she was still wearing, like, her old-timey samurai ninja clothes, but they were kind of getting a little ratty and dirty by now, right? Like, if they were kind of like, she can't really repair them, she doesn't have the fabrics for it, she can't buy new stuff when old stuff, so if it was all kind of worn out and a little bit, like, desaturated, and, like, there are things you could do with character storytelling like that that would imply that relationship, like how a character feels about their culture is usually on display in their dress, in their style of outfit, right? And that's the main thing that's really on my mind, because outside that, I don't really have any criticisms of Psylocke. I think the boots are maybe, I don't know, they're sort of half gesturing towards, like, tabi boots, right? Like, with the little toe thing on the other thing. But then on the other hand, these are also just clearly, like, very modern boots. And again, it's a little bit of that thing of, like, okay, but if you wanted to do the tabi thing, I think it would have been cooler if they were, like, actual old-timey tabi shoes, right? Of the style that, well, ninjas aren't actually real, but I hate to break it to you, but that ninjas as a facet of Japanese history are, for the most part, a myth. Like, they were just soldiers and samurai who did like sabotage and like battlefield subterfuge. The concept of it... Okay, Jesus Christ. Okay, so... I was here saying, like, oh, we're not going to go off on tangents. We're going to go... Okay, so, ninjas, right? Since we're doing this is one of my little historical pet peeves, right? So, what there absolutely 100% was, and there was lots of it in feudal-era Japan, is lots of assassins, lots of murderers, lots of saboteurs, spies, scouts, lots of people doing, like assassinations and all kinds of skullduggery on the battlefield, right? Like, all of the sort of tactics, all of the behaviors, all of the stuff that we sort of associate with, oh, that's what the ninja would have been doing. That stuff was done. But what there isn't any real hard concrete evidence for is this idea of essentially a social class of people known as the ninja, or even like the shinobi, who, like, this was the social class of people, like this, they lived in ninja fortresses and there was ninja clans who did special ninja training with ninja traditions that did all of that stuff. There just isn't a solid basis in the historical record for that. Now, there's lots of pop historians who will say otherwise. There's lots of pop historians who will, and this is, I'm taking, like, the source that I would recommend reading if you want, like, a dissection of, the sort of pop culture myth of ninjas. There's a pretty good section on it in the latter parts of Jonathan Clement's book, A Brief History of the Samurai, where he takes a pretty dim view of the historicity of the concept of the ninja. Basically, as he puts it, in his research, every single time he goes looking for primary sources that attest to the concept of, like, a ninja clan or, like, ninja training, this specific designated social class of people, it's all sources that reference each other or self-referential or which deliberately misunderstand every single instance of any kind of subterfuge, any kind of assassination, any kind of sabotage as, oh, all of that was the activity of the ninja, rather than it was because a bunch of soldiers did, like, dishonorable shit in war, like every soldier always does at every point in history, right? So, definitely there were spies, murderers, assassins, all of the stuff that we ascribe to the ninja. All of that stuff was done, but there wasn't a specific class of people called the ninja who were like, this was the social class of people, like this was like the specific kind of person who was responsible for that kind of shit. It was just people doing what people always do, which is subterfuge and underhanded bullshit, right? There's some nuance in that we get this, the men of Iga, as they refer to. Stephen Turnbull, I think, is one of the prominent Western historians who's partly responsible for popularizing the idea of the men of Iga specifically being ninjas, right? Like being like this specific class. He himself, relatively recently, I think in like sometime the late 2010s, if I'm remembering correctly, published a paper where he looked at his own research and like the way that he himself had framed that and kind of went, yeah, no, actually, I was probably being overexcitable there. Like, definitely there were people doing guerrilla tactics. There were definitely people doing a lot of that stuff. But again, this categorization, this consolidation of all of that into a class of person, as though the ninja were a class of person in the same way that the samurai were a class of person in society, that simply isn't true. The ninja as a character in fiction basically emerges wholesale out of the potboiler novels of like the 1950s and 60s, especially during the American occupation of Japan, where samurai media was outlawed. It was banned by law, censored by the government, because the occupying American forces didn't want the symbol of the samurai as something for like imperial sympathies in Japan to rally around. Which, if you know anything about the state of Japan's politics nowadays, you know, well, they didn't really succeed in stamping that out, but you know, fuck it, whatever. And so this new class of like feudal hero who wasn't the samurai, but who could perform many of the same sort of actions, act in many of the same kinds of stories, were basically invented out of whole cloth and became that which we think of now today as the ninja or the shinobi, right? As a class of person. So anyway, that's my tangent on that. Ninjas aren't real. I'm sorry. Not in the way that you understand them. Not in the way that if you've been watching Naruto. Not in the way if you've been playing video games. Ninja aren't real in that sense. What was I talking about? I think I was talking about Psylocke at some point, but I don't remember what I was saying about her that got me to this point. Anyway, my point is, I would like her fashion to be a little bit more... Like, I think it is a missed opportunity to have her fashion communicate her culture, like her and her relationship to culture That's really my only criticism. Outside of that, this is a cool-ass ninja. I like the fucking scarf, right? The scarf is such a video game-ass motherfucker. Like, that is straight out of, like, the Shinobi series of video games. Like, I think it's partly tokusatsu. I believe, like, the red scarf is, like, as like a design trope that's associated with heroes in Japanese media. I think that came out of tokusatsu first, and I think it made its way into video games from there, most iconically the Shinobi franchise of video games, right? Like, where this is such a fucking video game, like, ninja-ass ninja thing that ninjas wear in pop culture, and it is cool. Like, it persists because it is cool. It looks fucking great here. I really like it as an element of her character design, and having it sort of be psychically empowered, which I don't know how that works exactly on a physical level, but having it be like a psychic scarf that then becomes like this little trail of her butterflies that are like the symbols of her power, that's a fucking killer-ass character design feature. I like the butterflies as like a central motif for her as well. Again, I think that does come from Betty Braddock or Captain Britain's Psylocke. I think I saw a screenshot of like one of the very old comics when she was mind-controlled to be a bad guy for a while, but there was like, she had a thing where like she had this butterfly design that appeared on her face. I think it comes from there. So I quite like that. Like, very cool. Anyway, we've now spent 21 minutes, Jesus fucking Christ, on Psylocke, and we haven't even talked about her skins yet. So, first, there's the palette swap skin, and I remember I kind of like the contrast on this one. I like the black and pink. Like, I like that like, it has that much more sharp, powerful contrast. I don't know so much, like, I think in other ways, the pink kind of blends too much with her power a little bit. Like, it's... That's kind of a problem that I have with both of the color schemes is, like, it kind of works on her base design, because, like, the purple of her butterfly powers, that's a mixture of the red from her scarf and, like, her belt, and the other color, like, blue, which is, like, her primary color. So blue and red make sort of purple, basically. And, like, okay, that's, like, it's more of a sort of pinkish, like, very bright, like, it's not really a particularly blue purple, but, like, okay, that sort of makes sense. On the palette swap, I feel like it mashes and blends too much. It becomes too samey. But I really actually like the contrast of, like, the pure black with, like, the butterflies all outlined in bright pink. Like, I really quite like that, because, like, on her base outfit, they are kind of invisible, right? Like, they kind of blend into the fabric. They're supposed to. I like the contrast of them popping out like that. So I quite like that about this palette swap. Anyway, classic Psylocke. Let's try and move through this a little bit more quickly. This is the Psylocke that I know, right? Like, this is well, for the most part, this is the Psylocke that I know. This is 90s ass Psylocke. This is, you know, like sexy ninja assassin in the leotard with the sword Psylocke, for the most part. But one thing I remember very clearly about the way that Psylocke used to be presented, that was partly also because of the way that they used to render these kinds of things in comics back in, like, 90s, 2000s. She was wearing, like, a black leotard suit, but it was clearly made of latex, right? Like, it was clearly like a latex or like a rubber suit or like something that was really, really, really shiny, right? And that was partly so that the artists could put, like, these round circular highlights that really emphasize her buttocks, that really emphasized her chest, like, that really sort of like, oh my god, like, rah, right? Like, that made her sexier, that really emphasized and highlighted those things. They've gone with something quite different for the classic costume here. This is, like, a very drab, like, not very high contrast, not very highly saturated, like, bodysuit that's still definitely sexy. Like, it's still, like, don't make any mistakes, with legs that long and, like, a bodysuit that tight, this is still fan service, but it has a different vibe. It's not quite as leering, I think, as the way she was presented back in the classic comics sometimes could be, right? This doesn't feel so much like it's a suit that's designed to, like, force you to pay attention to her titties and her ass in the way that they used to be, right? And that's also a lot to do with the way that she's posed, like, with the way that, like, her animation works. She isn't doing those ridiculous, like, Hawkeye initiative twists, like, to really, like, show off and, like, really get her chest out so that the titties stand out and, like, really, like, emphasize the curve of the hips so, like, her butt looks good. The way that her character is presented here avoids, like, a lot of those hypersexualization tropes that is associated with comics, and also just the color scheme being more drab, like, lower contrast in general than it used to be. It's like, that all sort of, it takes it down a notch, right? Like, it's not unsexualized, it's still very sexy, but it, like, it's a difference in, like, the approach to presentation of those things, I think. And I quite like the scarves around her waist. Like, again, classic Psylocke, the way that the scarves were often... That's not from the comics, so that wouldn't be fair to use. The problem with Googling Psylocke is that it's hard to tell which bits are fan art, which bits are shitty AI art from the thumbnails, and which bits are actually stuff from the comics, because I don't want to bring up fan works and stuff about Psylocke, because, like, there's lots of cheese art about Psylocke, there's lots of, like, people doing, like sexy pinups of her as fan art, and I don't want to talk any shit about that, because that's fine. Like, that is just not a problem. Like, usually, right, like, the scarves on Psylocke, like, the little things that she has, the streamers and stuff, they weren't really rendered as major objects as part of the character. They were sort of appendages that were, like, they wrap around her in the same way that the leg straps, right, wrap around her thighs in order to emphasize the volume of the body underneath, right? In order to, like draw some attention to her hips, break up the two halves of her body, like give a little bit of separation from the torso to the hips and stuff like that. That's mostly what they were used for, right? Like, but they weren't really sort of considered major fashion accessories. They were rarely heavily rendered or particularly given a lot of attention as things. They were just like, yeah, some straps around the thing, like make it fly around dramatically like she's Spawn or whatever. That was mostly the effect. I quite like the way that they're approached here because, like, look, these are clearly tied in, like, a intricate and sort of carefully constructed knot or loop or something along those lines, like with a specific strap. And they, like, I don't know if this is realistic to how you would wear a long sort of waist scarf like this in reality, but there is, like, a specificity to it that makes it feel like, oh, this is like fashion. This is like something she's wearing that's like, you have to put some thought into it. This is about self-presentation. I quite like that. I quite like that there's a lot of attention being paid to this, like, belt thing that she's got going on as an object of art, right? Like, as a part of her self-expression. I like that. That also adds a little bit of a dimensionality to it. Like, it's not just that she's wearing a sexy bodysuit because some comic book artist thought that she needed to look sexy in order to sell the magazine issues. There is a sense of, like, oh, okay, it implies that there is a cognition on her behalf about, like, choosing her presentation, right? Like, I like that, where it's not just, this is the sexiest costume we can put on you, where we can hug it close to your body and show as much of it as possible, but there is a sense of aesthetic. And it's the same thing with, like, the butterfly motif, or whatever it is, like, whatever the hell that is. I can't really figure out what those bits of the design are, but that end up with these, like, butterfly flower motifs up around the thighs. Like, running down the side, it's like, oh, there's some fashion aesthetic here. Like, there's some, like, oh, this is, like, she's expressing something, right? And it's still, like, yeah, it's just the superhero. She has the butterfly thing, it's part of it. But I like the fashion of that. I like the aesthetic choice that it feels like that's being made there, right? Like, that she's someone who, like, has a symbol and cares about it. That's pretty cool. Like, those things I like. I also like that, like, cards on the table. Part of the reason why I remember 90s Psylocke so much as I do is because she was pandering to me. Right? I was the boy who was sitting there going, holy shit, like, that Psylocke looks great. I'm not paying much attention to what's happening in the story, but someone surely sculpted that ass for me to get cocky. Like, that was me. I was that kid, right? Like, this is all pandering to me, and it's working. Like, she looks damn fucking good. Like, absolutely no doubt about it in the world. And the long legs, right? So, like, on a standard human anatomy, more or less, the distance from your hip to your knee is more or less the same distance from your hip to the top of your collarbone, right? Like, that's some variety depending on, like, what kind of person you are and where you are. That's the sort of general standard, right? Psylocke here, the distance is, like, if you sort of try and measure it with your fingers or whatever on your screen, she has very long legs, right? Like, those are Bayonetta legs, right? Like, they are longer than you would expect on a standard human. That's a clearly intentional choice. And again, we've talked about this before with characters like Luna Snow, who does something of the same thing, right? Like, these very long legs, relatively short torso compared to it, they're pretty good as a proportion choice when you want a character to be particularly agile, when you want them to, like, be particularly, like, if someone is a ballet dancer, for example, as a character, it can be a very good idea to do that, or any kind of dancer. If someone's a performer, like Luna Snow, it also works on someone who's supposed to be, like, a hyper-agile, backflipping, like, ninja all over the place, like, running, kicking, jumping, doing all of that stuff. it's a pretty solid, like, anatomy choice about how to construct the character's body. And I quite like it here. Like, it really does give her that sense of, like, a sense of, like, speed and power and lethality, the way that it's presented. And I'm sort of in two minds, like, because on the one hand, I like that they've sort of de-emphasized some of the hypersexualization of 90s Psylocke, right? Because it does get a little cringe sometimes, like a little, like, it's made for 13-year-old boys, right? And so, as a 30-something-year-old man, I'm like, yeah, maybe that's, maybe that doesn't appeal to me so much anymore. On the other hand, I do kind of feel like this is, like, probably one of the skins where you could do the stiletto heels. If you wanted to, you could do, like, the high stiletto heels and, like, have a really sharp spike on it. That sort of implies that it's, like, a weapon she uses to kill or whatever. Like, this is probably one of the skins where you could do that level of, like, fan service. Not on the base skin. Like, this version of Psylocke clearly is more designed to look like she's a bit more practically minded. I feel like maybe on the sort of 90s skin, well, 1981, I guess, you could probably get away with, like, going with the big sort of stereotypical high heel thing. But anyway, moving on. That was, oh God, how long did I spend talking about Psylocke then? Half an hour. Okay, yeah, sure. I was there saying, like, oh yeah, we talked for 2 hours. It was so long, and now it's gone, and this one is going to be shorter. Fuck off. Why am I like this? Why am I like this? It's because of the ADHD. I'm just going to blame that instead of examining myself as a person in any way. Rocket Raccoon. Rocket Raccoon is interesting, because this is a much more... Actually, let's start with the Guardians of the Galaxy skin, actually. So, in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, right, Rocket Raccoon is a raccoon, right? Like, there's some alterations made to his body. Obviously, he doesn't quite have a normal raccoon's physiognomy. I think is the way you pronounce that. But he is, for the most part, an animal character, right? Like, he's an animal character who walks on two legs, talks, does the stuff. But he's not quite a furry in that sense, right? Like, he's not quite that anthro kind of character. Rocket Raccoon in Marvel Rivals is. This is a furry-ass character, right? He's a furry-ass character because he has essentially what is a human body, right? Digitigrade legs, still, because, you know, it's still some level of animal, but that's a furry, right? Like, that is someone's persona as in terms of the construction of the body, the way that it mixes human and animal characteristics. Very much a furry character. And I say that, like, fully as a compliment, not as a problem, just noting a difference in design approach, right? Like, where Guardians of the Galaxy, the element that Rocket is an animal with more intelligence than normal, that's kind of important to his character, right? In a way that here, clearly, it matters more that he's a tiny person in a fursuit, right? Like, that's the choice that's being made here in terms of presentation. And it is also a very different version of Rocket Raccoon than the one I remember from Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Guardians of the Galaxy, Rocket Raccoon is all, yeah, I'm mad and I'm sardonic and I tell mean jokes and I'm an asshole, but it's because I have a deep well of emotional sadness inside of me and I have to push everyone away, right? Like, it's because he is this deeply traumatized, broken, like, kind of very fragile creature, really, emotionally speaking, who's always like shouting and acting out and like stealing batteries he doesn't need because he is in pain, because it's driving people away on purpose to protect himself emotionally, right? Like, that's the kind of character that he is. Not so much with the presentation of this version of Rocket Raccoon, I don't think. This version of Rocket looks decidedly more gremlin, right? Like, this version of Rocket is much more about, I'm a small gremlin with a big gun, like, flying around with my fucking railgun, minigun, shooting at stuff, explosions, big fucking Cheshire Cat grin thing going on, like, with really, like, tearing the whole face in half in order to really deliver that grin. He's much more of that kind of a character, right? And to that end, the mohawk and, like, the earring, I think, a pretty well-chosen aspect. Like, for one thing, they complete his silhouette here. You can kind of see it if you look at Guardians Rocket, that, like, by comparison, there's kind of something missing on the upper half of the character, right? Like, where this spiky hairdo and the wildness and the relatively more spiky aspect to the way that his fur is rendered, you can actually see that, like, Guardians Rocket, his fur spikes here, they kind of lean downwards a little bit, right? Versus Rivals Rocket, where it's like, it's almost sort of curling upwards a little bit. It's like much spikier, sharper, more pokey, more punky in a way, right? Like, it's definitely inflected by punk aesthetics, right? Where he's like this, ha ha, I love explosions and stuff. He has that Ziggs personality from League of Legends as a comparison point, right? That's a very different character. That's much less of like this, I am a vulnerable emotional animal who's lashing out because I am insecure, and this is much more like, maybe he has a complex emotional interiority, but it's definitely not on display in the character design. And you can kind of see it a little bit also. Like, that's another thing. Like, Rocket's ears in the Guardians version, they're softer, right? The whole face is a lot softer. The way that the mask, the Raccoon mask, right, is used with these white sclera versus like white versus like the pure red glow that he has here that gives him that demonic gremlin energy. The white sclera, like, that's much more humanized, feels much more emotional, vulnerable, right? Like, it's something that's more easy to relate to. And so he's still posing like the gremlin that he's supposed to be in Rivals, but even with the little changes that are there, I feel like you can see the difference in affect and attitude, right? Between these two versions of the character. And to be clear, I quite like it. Like, I find this version of Rocket very charming. Like, the Mohawk especially is a really solid choice for the kind of, like, murder gremlin that he's supposed to be here. Now, something I do miss, though, is, like, he has all of this punk aesthetic, right? He has all of this, like, the spikes, and he's got, like, the fucking gauntlets, and, like, and the weapon he's wielding is clearly supposed to be, like, a junk weapon, right? Like, it's supposed to be this piece of crap that he sort of threw together with a bunch of tech that he found, and it's always kind of breaking, and he's always, like, fixing it with duct tape or whatever. That's the vibe I'm getting, certainly, from his animation, right? And the way that he relates to this object is, like, it's supposed to be this scrap gun that he put together with his super science knowledge. But one thing I'm missing is all of it, everything about him just looks way too clean, right? And this is a general thing that exists in a lot of video game aesthetics. It is dirt, grime, like shabbiness, wear and tear. Those things are very absent from a lot of video game aesthetics. It's a problem I have in League of Legends as well, right? It's a problem I have in a lot of games that, like, think of Genshin Impact. No one in Genshin Impact is ever dirty. There's not a stain on anyone's clothes, ever. No matter what you've been doing, no matter how many fucking monsters you've been fighting in the rain or whatever, the clothes are always immaculately clean on the character, right? Because there is this obsession with cleanliness in the costuming, which, like, someone once told me that it's a cultural thing in East Asian markets specifically, that, like, being dirty, being shabby, being poorly maintained or whatever, that's more of a cultural taboo over there, which, like, okay, fair enough. But it is this thing that gets in the way of storytelling, because, like, this version of Rocket, right, like, this little gremlin man who, like, shoots the gun and flies around, right, why would he be clean? Why would his jumpsuit be immaculate? Like, why wouldn't there be tears and holes and patches? Why wouldn't there be dirt? Why? And even, it extends even to the gun. It's like, this is supposed to be kind of a junk gun that's always, like, 2 steps away from falling apart. And you get the little bits on it that are sort of jiggling and stuff. But this still looks way too clean, right? This still looks way too well-made and way too high-tech and way too, like it's a complete object that's only put together from parts that are supposed to go together. Whereas I feel like it would be stronger if it was like, oh no, he put this gun together from, like, parts from, like, 9 different weapons or whatever, right? This would be stronger as a thing of, like, this is a scrap weapon that could blow up at any time! That would be stronger if the gun was more visibly made of junk. It was more visibly made of, like, disparate pieces of garbage that weren't supposed to go together, but Rocket has made them go together, and now it's, like, an incredibly powerful gun that's really dangerous to use. I'm kind of missing that, right? Because, like, it's too clean, it's too well made, it's all too high in terms of craftsmanship, in a way that I feel kind of contradicts what the rest of the character design is trying to do, right? Like, with the way that the rest of the character design is trying to get you to relate to this character and understand him is like, but why would he be clean? He's crawling through vents, right? He's looking for scrap and, like, nonsense in junkyards. He's a little gremlin who doesn't bother to wash his socks or whatever. Like, that's the vibe the rest of the character design is trying to sell me. And then the cleanliness on him is just kind of, there's a contradiction there. And, like, in-game, this probably doesn't show up that much, right? Like, in-game, this doesn't matter very much. It's not something you're really gonna notice. But just on the character design side, like, this Rocket feels like he should maybe have a chunk missing from his ear, right? Maybe, like, a little scar across the nose. Maybe a little patch of, like, naked fur where he burned himself with a flamethrower at one point, right? Or a little bit of, like, just burned fur somewhere. Or some damage to his tail, things like that. That feels a little bit like it's missing. The evidence of a life lived as Rocket Raccoon, I feel like it's missing. And that's my main criticism. Outside of that, I really like this little fucking gremlin, man. I think this is pretty solid as, like, small gremlin furry character design. Oh, shit, we forgot to do the MVPs for Psylocke. And I quite like this one. Like, I really like the ending with, like, this, like, cut across the image, like with her in like a dynamic pose holding the sword. I think that's a very strong ending frame. The one criticism I have is, given that it's literally, she's doing the teleportation, right? And then the camera is kind of wobbling around almost as though it's looking for her. I think it would be a little bit cooler if the camera was like, it turns around and then she was right behind you, like with her sword across your neck. Like a teleports behind you, nothing personnel kid kind of way, like that. If you really want to lean into like the cool ninja shit. By contrast, her teleporting into the air and then, like, spin dashing into you, that feels a little bit less ninja and a little bit more martial, like, a little bit more fighting game martial arts, right? Small criticism, doesn't matter, the ending frame is really cool. This one, the pose she strikes. Also, the spinning of the weapon, but that fucking pose is so fucking, like, God, that's good. I like the right angle with, like, the blade across the thing. And it's also such a fucking comic book cover-ass kind of pose. Like, it's also such a... If I was seeing, like, a Witchblade comic or, like, a Psylocke solo run or whatever, back when, like, we used to have comic shops that you could go to, this feels like the cover of one of those. Like, this feels very much like something inside of that vibe. Like, maximum impact. Does the pose make any logical sense? No, but who cares? It looks cool! Very much that, and I quite like it. Like, again, it's appealing to my nostalgia. Now, Roque. This one's solid enough, I think. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I like the way that he's handling the gun, especially, right? That... he just kind of drags it behind him, right? Like, he's not holding onto it carefully. He's not practicing any kind of trigger discipline. He's not being careful with it in any sense of the word. He's just, like, flying and flailing it around, dragging it behind him as he goes. I like that. I like that casualness and lack of care and lack of carefulness with the weapon. Like, again, that feels like it's very true to the version of the character that I'm reading from the rest of the character design. And this one, like, if you weren't convinced it was a furry-ass character design before, look at that final frame. Like, I'm just gonna freeze the image for us here. Like, look at that final-ass frame. And let me just get it to stop playing back a bunch of noise. That's a furry character, right? Like, that's the way that he's presented. Like, he's a fucking... This is Nick Wilde, right? This is fully on some Zootopia bullshit, right? The way that he's presented, like, with the tilted angle and, like, the confident grin and holding the big gun in front of him is like... I've seen furry art like this. I've seen furry art like this a million times. That's what this is. And I say all of that as a compliment. Like, I like that aspect of it. It's cool. But, like, someone's getting horny about this. Someone saw this and went, like, some kid who hasn't quite figured themselves out yet is going to see that and kind of go, I want to be a raccoon. Like, that is going to happen as surely as it happened to everyone who watched Robin Hood as a child. That's a furry-ass pose. It's not because it's particularly sexy. It's not because it's particularly like, ooh, Rule 34, whatever. Because that's not the essence of it. It's because it's a very specific presentation of animal characteristics that heighten human emotions and, like bring out an aspect of confidence, power, self-assuredness, the caricature that's aiding in that. That's why this is a furry-ass character design. And it works. Like, I think someone's gonna get, like, I think someone's gonna have their furry awakening from this, from this. Someone is definitely gonna. Moving on to Scarlet Witch. And there's a lot I like. A lot about how Scarlet Witch looks like in this game. So the hair especially, I think, is very cool. So Scarlet Witch, right? Like, so her thing is chaos magic, right? She, like, and there's a bunch of MCU stuff about how chaos magic works. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the comics. Like, she's a very, 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 very powerful sorcerer. At one point, she cast a spell that just erased most mutants from the universe in Marvel. I think it was called House of M, that storyline, whatever. Like, but she's, at multiple times, she has had, like, unfathomably powerful cosmic powers. And a lot of the story about Scarlet Witch is this struggle for control over her powers. Like, that's often where it goes, right? I think that was what Multiverse of Madness was kind of on. Also, it's about control, right? And so to that end, if you look at her character design in Marvel Rivals, right, what you'll see is so many straps, right? Like, so many, like, crisscrossing straps across her arms. You got this lock almost that's sort of over her collar. Like, over her hands, there's straps. There's all this crisscrossing imagery of, like, things being tied down, bound in place, held together. It's a very tied down character design, right? Like, even on the boots, right? Like, with this huge zipper and these enormous zipper locks that are, like, really emphasizing this is a character who has tied themselves down tight, right? Like, I'm constraining myself in really, really hard. Because that's kind of part of Wanda's story, right? Is that she's this person who's always kind of struggling for control over her chaos magic, and that her chaos magic often does things that she doesn't want, and that hurts people or has disastrous effects on the universe. So I like that aspect of the costume design. And then you have the hair, right? Because the hair is the opposite of that. If you wanted to continue the whole tying yourself down, holding on to your self-control thing, then you would give her, like, a really tight ponytail, or, like, some kind of, like, very tightly woven braid, or, like, something on her head, like, a way with her hair that was very sort of constrained, cut down. You would give her short hair, maybe even, like, shave her head, something like that, to really emphasize, like, we're trying to constrain all aspects of wildness, all aspects of randomness, chaos. But that's not what they do. We have this element of the hair as this, like, this is a big, wild, uncontrolled, uncombed mane of hair, right? And hair is associated with power. Like, that goes all the way back to Samson in the Bible, right? But that's a general thing. Like, if you have a character who has, like, a big, huge, wild head of hair, that's often associated with power, with strength, and with passion, with rawness, with anger, with, like, right? Those are associations that, like, a huge mane of hair like this carries. So I like that as a counterpoint to the sort of controlled, tied down, very strapped in nature of the rest of the costume. I do wish they would carry that contrast a little bit further. I kind of wish, and this is a small thing, I kind of wish that in some places on her costume, right, if little imperfections were there, right, if, like, there was some place where, like, maybe one strap has come undone a little bit or broken, if there was, like, one little place where something was frayed or something was kind of breaking or something was out of place or not quite symmetrical, like, especially the symmetry, I would like it if there was, like, one little bit of her costume that was, like, visibly asymmetrical and kind of unbalanced, because, again, that does that work of implying the duality, right? Like, we have the duality of, on the one hand, the characters trying to maintain very strict control over themselves, and then on the other hand, they kind of can't, right? Like, that's part and parcel of the character. Anytime you have a storyline that's about a character struggling to maintain control, well, a part of that is sometimes they lose control. That's sort of the inevitable place the story has to go. So I would like it if there was, like, little hints in her costume that something was out of place, right? That something wasn't quite symmetrical, something wasn't quite perfect, some of all of this tying yourself down wasn't quite working, right? Something was breaking free in a way that it's not supposed to. I think that could do something for the storytelling of the costume design here again. Now, again, Marvel Rivals, most of the time you're going to be over the shoulder looking at the character at this size, right? It's not, you don't really get a close look at their costuming in the way that you would in a movie or a comic book. So, like, what kind of details could you do that are small and subtle enough to be kind of like, oh, you spot the sign, but, like, not so subtle that they're completely fucking invisible in an in-game perspective? That's a difficult square to circle, but But that's my main criticism. Is like I would like a little bit more of the aspect of like I'm trying to control myself so powerfully, but it's always failing just a little bit, right? There's always that little risk of something is like a little bit out of my control, like something's going a little bit wrong for me. Because we kind of get that in the Multiverse of Madness version, like the full Elizabeth Olsen version. Here we have the frayed bits of the coat, like with the hole in it, right? Where most of her outfit, because in the movie, I did not watch it because it got terrible reviews when it came out. My understanding is that Wanda is like playing into the super villain role, and she's like, I'm taking control and I'm ruling this place and I'm using my power freely to get what I want because I want to reestablish control over my life kind of thing. But she's also constantly losing control, right? It's also something that's going wrong for her ultimately. And here, in this version of the character design, like the way her fingers are blackened, for example, right? The way that her hands are clearly being affected by what she's doing. The way that most of her outfit, which is a movie costume, so it's like a lot less elaborate than the game costumes, most of her outfit is like symmetrical and it's in control and it's like she's looking like the Scarlet Witch, but then there's like the little things are fraying a little bit around the edges, right? Like this is all eating at her just a little bit. It's tearing away at her. It's having an effect on her, right? Like this struggle for control over her power, over her magic. It's not something that's like she has got 100% on lock. I like that. I like those elements, and I wish there was a little bit more of that in the base version of the character design. The palette swap is fine. I think the black color scheme of the black and gray is a little bit too boring. It's a good contrast with the red, but it needs a couple more red elements to sort of really balance it out. I think it's fine. The MVP animations, though. Oh, wait, hang on. It's got a proper costume going. I like this a lot. I think this fucks. I think like the whole like pentagram, lightning, like, and then the gesture as she's about to unleash something horrible on someone, the trails of magic, like that very strong flash frame. I really like this MVP. But the fucking Multiverse of Madness MVP. Like, holy fucking shit, right? The things they're doing to her character model, the way they're breaking and cheating to camera, as she's like pulling herself out and there's this voiceless scream and she's like stumbling fully on some fucking The Ring shit is like, goddamn, this made me want to watch Multiverse of Madness. Like, if that shit is in the movie, I should have fucking been watching it. Like, no matter how bad it might have been in the reviews, like, holy shit. Because, like, the horror element here, right? Like, fully leaning into horror. Fully leaning into something that's, like, genuinely kind of fucking scary. That fucking rules. Like, that is really cool. And, like, again, that's the thing I wish there was just a little bit of more of a hint of that in her base character design, in the way that there is here, right? With Multiverse of Madness, Wanda, just a little bit of hint of that, like, oh, like, if this goes wrong, right? If she loses control, if she doesn't hold on to her powers perfectly at all times, bad shit is gonna happen, right? Like, that's a little bit of the vibe I'm looking for, which is where I kind of wish the blackened fingers from this version would be ported over to the main version, because that's a very good, like, the fact that the fingers look like they're kind of rotting or they're being blackened or burned by what she's doing, that's a good way to imply that, like, to imply that there is like a really severe, much more powerful peril at play somewhere in this than like the rest of the character design is letting on. But that's really my only, like, that's really my only criticism. Like, I really like the costume here. I like the contrast between the costume and the hair. I like the storytelling that the costume is doing. Like, this I think is really, really solid. And now we're moving on to the boy. Spidey Boy. The man who is Spider. And he looks like himself. For the most part, like, this is a Spider-Man-ass Spider-Man design that looks like Spider-Man. And that's one of the things of, like, what else were they gonna do, right? Like if you're doing Peter Parker Spider-Man instead of Miles Morales, right? What else were they gonna do? What else could you do? What else could you possibly do except do Spider-Man as Spider-Man exists, right? It's one of those things, like, what else, like, I'm sitting here going like, well, what if they did something unique? What if they did something special? Like what, like with Psylocke, with an alternate reality version. It's like, yeah, but it's Spider-Man though. Like it's, you kind of have to have Spider-Man, and when you have Spider-Man, it kind of has to be Spider-Man, right? Like to an extent, there's like, I think if they were trying to do something too different and too cute and too out of the box with him, I would probably look at that and go, I mean, it's cool that they did something out of the box, but I kind of just wanted Spider-Man. I think I would kind of, I wouldn't really receive that very well, because it's fucking Spider-Man. You need Spider-Man. That being said, there are some interesting details that are specific to the incarnation that we have of him in Marvel Rivals, right? Which is that the Spider-Man suit that he's wearing is one that feels very like the PS4 Spider-Man game, right? It feels very much of a kind with that, in the sense that it is a padded suit, right? He's got knee protectors, he's got elbow protectors, right? Like he's clearly wearing some kind of sneaker or boot underneath the suit, right? Like he's clearly wearing, like, there's padding, there's protection. It's clearly kind of sculpted over his form. And that is a specific kind of Spider-Man suit. That's not every Spider-Man suit is not like that. Some Spider-Man suits are much more like a body stocking, right? Like where it's not that he's wearing some kind of athletic suit with any kind of protection or any kind of like layering or padding. He's just kind of wearing a suit that's like a body sock with some Spider-Man stuff over it. That kind of used to be the classic version of Spider-Man, right? Like that, it was a thing where he was just kind of wearing a tight bodysuit that wasn't really like athletic. It didn't look like it was like an Olympic swimsuit kind of thing. Like, didn't look like there was any tech or anything special going on with it, right? So this is like a more modern Spidey in that sense, right? Like it's trying to have the suit essentially be a kind of gadget for him, right? A thing that has special functions that help him in some way. So you have like the knuckle protection on his fists for punching with, and things like that. And that is a different vibe. Like classic Spider-Man was much more, like, often much more sharp in his visual language. This is more bulky. This is more like chiseled out of granite, very angular. Whereas like Spider-Man is often presented very stylized, very sleek, very slick. Like often, like plenty of comics that I've read of Spider-Man, they don't even render him that muscular. It goes up and down. It depends on which version of the character we're talking about. But plenty of them really don't emphasize muscularity on Spider-Man at all. They make him very, very sleek, very, very smooth. Like very, very agile and very thin, but not really shredded, right? And this is also a shredded version of Spider-Man, where like there's lots of muscle going on. That version of Spider-Man also exists in plenty of places, but it is a specific choice that's being made about like how to present Spider-Man as a character, right? I do like the posture. I like the body type on him. I like that it's not just shredded, big, chunky superhero physique, that he is lithe and agile, that he kind of looks like he is, like if he was at the Olympics, he would be like a pole vaulter or a sprinter or like an athletic gymnast, that kind of thing, right? Like he has that really sort of like thin, skinny, shredded body kind of vibe going on. I like the posture as well. Like, I like that he doesn't just have superhero posture, right? Like, he doesn't just have chest out, arms back, chin up, sort of like Superman posture. He has something that's a little bit more like a little bit more hunched forward with the shoulders, a little bit more like sort of athletic and ready. He even has that in his idle animation here, where he's like doing those little jogs on the spot, right? I think it all works really well. I like the silhouette that he gets. Like, look how long his fucking neck is, for example, right? That's a long ass neck. And that's another specific choice about like how to present his body, how to present his athleticism, is to give him like a long, fairly slender neck that goes very smoothly up into the back of the head and like creates this long line of action down through the way that he's posing. It's like it's a good presentation of Spider-Man, this, I think. It really is. And I also like I like that he doesn't shut up, right? Even in his introduction here, it's like he can't help but do a little woohoo, right? I like that. And also in the idle animations, oh hi, right? Because Spider-Man never shuts up. It's a very important part of Spider-Man that he never shuts the fuck up. Never ever. He's always bantering. He's always saying shit, right? And I like that that's there. That's a nice part of the presentation. Now, the costumes. Let's start with Chasm here. This one I did not know. I had no idea where the fuck this was from. Apparently, Amazing Spider-Man 20, he's never seen it before. And that's because... Let me just find him here. It's partly because it's clone bullshit, right? Like, this is Ben Reilly, right? Like, which is one of the 90s Clone Saga is its own whole thing. I was there for it, so I remember it. But this is a clone of Spider-Man called Ben Reilly, who was made by a guy named the Jackal, who was trying to fuck with Peter's life and sort of replace him. And there's also a clone called Kane, and there's a bunch of other ones. I think there's a couple of Ben Reillys also, and there's another fake Peter Parker, and God knows what the fuck. There was a lot of it going around, okay? There was a whole bunch of it. And apparently this is a version of Ben Reilly, who, like, becomes dark, evil edgelord Spider-Man at some point, who's, like, got this fucking Halloween-ass costume with all this nonsense coming off of it kind of thing. And, like, if this is what it's supposed to be, right, then this is a little bit... Really? I don't think those are the same thing, Marvel Rivals. I don't really think that looks like the thing that it's supposed to look like very much. Like, you could have done that just with textures. Like, you could have just done textures on the suit, and you could have gotten something that looked a lot closer. Because, like, if you were gonna do Chasm, if you were gonna do this fucking Halloween-as edgelord version of Ben Reilly, then, like, do it. Do it for real. Like, this is just a palette swap. And I know that's what it's supposed to be, right? It's just supposed to be the palette swap skin, but, like, come on. Come on. Like, that's not just a palette swap Spider-Man. Like, just give him the black suit, then. Like, if that's what you're gonna do, just give him the black suit if you want to palette swap it. Like, come on. If you're gonna do something like that, like Chasm, this is not cool enough. I'm sorry. That's a little too cheap. That's a little too cheap. Anyway, the other one, Spider-Man No Way Home. That's basically their version of, like, the Iron Spider, right? Like, which, like, is a design that's also had a bunch of different designs within the comics, I believe, which is, like, the Tony Stark armor Spider-Man suit thing. They are going a little restrained on it, though. Like, it's not fully, like, a sort of cyber suit the way that it was in the movie, as I recall it, anyway. There's a little bit, you can see a little bit of the armor plating going on, but for the most part, they are kind of keeping it that same kind of, like, close-fitting rubber athletic suit thing that the main costume has. Which, like, if you were gonna do the Iron Spider thing, Spider-Man No Way Home stuff, again, much in the same way, like, I feel like you could commit to that a little bit harder. And I'm actually gonna Google the No Way Home suit. Because, yeah, I mean, I guess the No Way Home suit kind of does look... Because, like, it has this kind of look, right? Like, where it is much more of, like, everything is shiny, everything's kind of metal about it. It's much more of, like, a cyber suit, right? In a way that this feels still much more like a rubber suit, which, yeah, whatever. Doesn't really matter that much. This one, though. I love this. I'm really happy we got bag on his head Spider-Man. That's very nice. I like that the web shooters are clearly just taped to his hands. I like this sort of shitty university parka thing that he's wearing with, like, this sort of pajama pants ass looking cargo pants. And, like, he has to go barefoot because he doesn't have his special Spider-Man shoes that let him use his sticking power. And there's the little Fantastic Four charm. Is like, I believe this is from a storyline where Spider-Man was, like, visiting the Baxter building, where he was like he was visiting the Baxter building for something, I think, to do with the Venom symbiote or something. And then something superhero stuff happens. He doesn't have his costume. He has to put a bag on his head. And kind of, like, run around as, like, in a sort of fantastic... I think he had a Fantastic Four... Yeah, he did. I found it. Here it is. Yeah, there he is. Like, basically, this is how he ended up running around. After having a little bit of trouble at the Baxter building. Which, like, I kind of wish he had the Fantastic Four suit a little bit, I guess. But also, there's something really, really charming about the shitty... He's just like a shitty college student on like a Sunday who was planning to stay at home on the couch and play Xbox or whatever, but then all of a sudden he has to go do the thing. Like, it's very nice. And the little detail that the eye holes are kind of cut in the shape of like Spider-Man eyes is like... Oh, that's very good. I really like this. Charming. Like, this is a good comedy costume that still is like grounded in the comics. I quite like it. Oh, I should probably... I also really fucking like this final frame on the first, like, the default MVP. Because, like, that's a fucking Spider-Man pose right there. Like, that's... I could open a comic with Spider-Man in it, and he would be doing a pose like that in one of the panels as he's, like, swinging his way across New York City. Like the extreme foreshortening, like, this, like, being kind of splayed out in the air with the arms and legs, like, that is a really good final frame for Spider-Man. And I appreciate a lot that he has the fucking Todd McFarlane webs. Well, not just Todd McFarlane, but I remember them most acutely from his run on Spider-Man back then. With, like, the central thing and then, like, these swirling eddies of, like, string material that just kind of curl around it. It's like, that's such a... Again, it's pandering to my nostalgia, but that's such a good fucking classic-ass, like, good-ass Spider-Man pose. I really like this. I really like this as well. This is also quite good. Like, the desperation of, like, I need something, I need something, I need something. Okay, back, fine. Happens to have eye holes cut into it already somehow. But, like, and the little, like, pop-ups of, like, the comic effects, the question mark and stuff. This is very cute and fun. That's adorable. Like, it's a little mini movie, right? Very effective. I quite like it. Then there's this one. Where, like, okay, you're using the other two costumes from the game. Okay, sure, but that should be Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, though. Like, that was the whole point of the movie. Like, the whole point of the movie was that it was Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield that were doing the multiverse thing, right? So that... I get that you just want to reuse the skins you already have, but you're gonna add them eventually. Like, eventually, you're gonna add Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man suit. You're gonna add Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man suit. Just do it now. Like, or at least once you add them to the game, replace them in this MVP intro. Because that was the whole point of the movie that you're referencing, is that it was Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. So it's not fucking Chasm. It's not fucking two of the same Peter Parker. Like, come on, honestly. It's fine. It's just one of those little things that's like, really? Like, really? The whole point was that it would be... whatever. But a little thing that annoys me. There's a lot of expressiveness also. Like, if you look at Spider-Man's face when the spell goes wrong, the little eye movements that really sort of sell his expression. And I quite like that. I also really like this one. This is cute. This is funny. This is quite adorable that he would have a little spider yo-yo trick that he does. I don't know if this is a thing that can even be done. I want this thing to be a thing where, like, there's a 1% chance that each time he uses it, he'll whack himself in the head with it instead of it being successful. I want that to be a thing, like just a little 1% chance that it goes wrong. Like a little 1% chance that he's showing off and then bonk, whacks himself in the side of the head. I think that would be cool and funny, but otherwise I quite like that one. Okay, we are making okay time. We're making okay time. Yeah, I don't think anyone really cares what I have to say about Squirrel Girl. So let's talk about Star-Lord. Star-Lord, he's important. People like Star-Lord. They care about him. He's a fan favorite. Everyone wants to talk about Star-Lord. No one wants to talk about Squirrel Girl. I am joking with you. Obviously, I'm joking with you. We're going to talk about Squirrel Girl. So, the rumor on the interwebs is that she's a strong front-runner for being the porn mascot of Marvel Rivals. I don't know. I haven't checked the numbers on Rule 34. Because, you know, but she seems to be a character who's been gaining a lot of attention and popularity in that regard, at the very least, which, like, that's cool. And I am curious about that. Like, there was a plan I had at some point. I wanted to do a video about like Overwatch porn, right? Like the way that the importance that specifically the Rule 34 content, specifically the 3D animated Overwatch porn content. Like, I wanted to try and do an examination of, like, the way in which character design interacts with that. Because it's not just that the characters are hot, right? Because characters in all kinds of video games all the time, everywhere, are hot. That's 90% of video games is hot characters. So why Overwatch, right? Like, why did Overwatch specifically catch on so much? Because that has to be something about the way that Overwatch designs characters, right? Something about the way Overwatch designs characters has to have had that appeal. I never ended up making the video because I can't on YouTube. Like, there's no way in fucking hell. If I was on Nebula, like, maybe they would let me upload something like that. Because I would have to kind of look at some examples somehow. And I would want to talk to some of the people who make their living, like, making that kind of content. And get their opinions on, like, what is it about these characters do you think that's, like, really specifically, or what speaks to you about it? Because I'm curious. Like, I'm genuinely curious about that as a part of the Overwatch phenomenon. Because I've been seeing memes about Marvel Rivals with the same thing, right? Like, oh, this is going to be the new big porn game, right? Like, it's going to be the new big game that's like all of the Patreons with the 3D animators are going to be just making these characters fuck. And specifically, Squirrel Girl has come up a lot in those conversations, at least that I've seen. And I'm curious about, like, I'm curious how that's going to shake out. But Squirrel Girl, let's talk about her from a different perspective. And let's start with something important. Squirrel Girl is not fat. I just want to establish that right up front, like, immediately. Squirrel Girl is not fat. This is not a fat body. I'm sorry. Like, look at the size of her waist. That's just a normal waist. She's not super skinny. She's not, like, it's not like fucking Luna Snow, right? Like, who is, like, really, really sort of super K-pop skinny, right? But this is just a normal body, right? Like, this is just a normal weight body. Like, her BMI is probably, like, perfectly within the average range as she is presented here, right? And I bring that up mostly because I've been seeing a lot of people, like, when they talk about Squirrel Girl, it's like, oh my god, a chubby queen, like a fat girl. Like, it's like, no, I'm sorry, that's not what she is. Like, she's definitely larger and rounder and curvier than pretty much every single other woman in, like, Marvel Rivals so far. But that's, like, that's kind of just a criticism of Marvel Rivals' approach to character design and comic books' approach to character design. That you can have a body that's just like, this is a perfectly ordinary, normal weight, like average weight body, and then everyone kind of goes, ooh, she kind of thick though. She's kind of like, because no, she isn't. Like it's this very, and it is a form of, like, it's a little bit of form of brain poisoning, and this is where we get back to those images I showed you previously, sort of by accident. So, this is a photo series called Athlete by a photographer named Howard Schatz, where he just basically took a whole bunch of Olympic athletes, lined them up, there's some oil on them to sort of make them shiny underneath the lights, and then he just took pictures of what they look like relative to each other. The scales are not 100%, like, they're not all perfect height to scale, but the thing I want you to pay attention to here is, like, these are all Olympic-level athletes, right? Like, these are all some of the strongest athletes, best competitors, like, most physically fit people you could ever possibly meet in your life. And I want you to look at the sheer variety of body type that exists, even within the very narrow field of peak human physical performance. This many different bodies are still possible, right? And I also want you to pay attention to the difference in their bodies based on the sports that they play, right? Look at the rhythmic gymnastics girl next to the boxer, for example. Look at both of those next to the shot put and the hammer throw, right? Look at that next to adventure racing, which is like a really intense, like, outdoor, like, how fucking shredded Miss Kathy Sasson really is, right? Next to the swimmer, right? I believe Staciana Stitz, by the way, since people bring it up every time I use this picture for anything, I think she has alopecia, and that's why she's bald. Look at the difference here, like, and look at this versus bodybuilding, right? Like, how different these bodies are. How long the legs are, how long the torsos are relative to the length of the legs, like, how bulky they are, how much power they have in their midriffs based on the sport that they're doing, right? Look at the midriff of the swimmer next to, for example, the person who's doing hammer throw, right? These are incredibly different bodies, because each of these bodies are adapted to a specific discipline, right? So even if the argument is, well, these are the strongest, most powerful people on Earth, of course they're going to be skinny, of course they're going to be fit. I completely agree, that's fine, but then surely, even if that is the standard we're applying, surely we could do more, and we could do more interesting things than just this specific version of skinny over and over and over again, right? Because there are things, like I talked about with Psylocke, right? Like where the decision to have those really, really long legs, that aids her character design. That's a good decision about body type to aid the construction of the character and how she looks. But if you think about her from the perspective of, this is an elite, like, assassin whose, like, entire life has been defined by hard physical training to be good at, like, the killing arts and what she does, then look at this relative to this, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, right? Like, so one thing I want to dispel here, one thing I want to get rid of, when people come at me about, like, different body types in fiction, they often bring up, like, realism as an argument, right? Well, it's not realistic. Like, why would there be a fat person who's fighting in, like, a fighting tournament? Like, because you can't be fat and, like, and that's where I was like, look at Cheryl Hayworth here. She's a Olympic weightlifting champion, right? Like, this woman won a bronze medal for weightlifting in the women's category when she was like 17 fucking years old. What does her body look like? This is what strength looks like. She's fat, yeah, and she's incredibly powerful. So this idea that you can only be strong if you're thin, right? Or this idea that like physical strength only has like one expression, and that's why all the characters have to look the same way, because you can only express that physical fitness in one way. Like, why would magic not have a body that is more akin, for example, to the boxer? She's swinging a huge-ass fucking sword around all the time. Why wouldn't she have a body like that? Like, why wouldn't that be more her body type if she's supposed to be really strong, right? If she's supposed to be really strong. You can argue that she's more of a wizard, but it's a hard argument to make when she's running around with a broadsword, or greatsword that's as tall as she is. And the point of this isn't that having skinny, attractive women is evil or bad, or that it's sexist. Like, there's definitely an element of that in there. Just that character design can do more, and when it is allowed to do more, it gets interesting, which is why I bring up Squirrel Girl. The fact that Squirrel Girl kind of instantly became really popular as a porn fan art character, like that a lot of people instantly got really fucking horny for her. That part gives lie to the other thing, right? Which is the other sort of argument is like, well, it has to sex because sex sells, right? Sexiness sells. They have to be hot and sexy because of sales. They have to, and setting aside the pathetic bootlicking of doing capitalism's argument for it, like, I'm sorry, I thought we were all in agreement that commercial interests infringing on what is done with art is a bad thing and not a good thing that should be applauded, actually. Even if your goal is just to pander, even if your goal is just to make people horny, even if your goal is just to use sex to sell, and that's an aphorism that is extremely oversimplified and not really true in the way that most people think of it, even if that is your goal, part of what Squirrel Girl shows, with that tiny bit of body variety she introduces to Marvel rivals, even if that is your goal, there is still value to having body type diversity. There's still value to having more different types of bodies, even if your only goal is to sexualize them. Even if your only goal is to make them wank material, there's still value to that. It is still a good thing. It is still artistically valuable. It's still good even for pandering, if that's what you want, right? Now, I think it's more important that it's used for, like, interesting storytelling. It's a way to differentiate characters, create unique, interesting expressions of art that enrich our aesthetic lives in some way, shape, or form. But even if you're just a coomer, even if you just want to jerk off over it, even then, there is value to diversity in body type, right? Just had to go off on that little rant. And Squirrel Girl was the character to do it on, because she's the one I've been seeing. It's also because it annoys me that every time, like, it's the same thing with Mei. Mei from Overwatch is like, she's basically the Mei from Overwatch of Marvel Rivals, right? Because May had the same thing. Like, May was added to Overwatch, and everyone's like, oh my god, it's a chubby fat girl, it's a chubby fat girl. It's like, and then you actually see her when she's not wearing the enormous fucking winter parka that she's wearing. It's like, oh no, that's just a girl with a completely normal body weight. Like, she's not particularly fat. She's a little bit curvy. Little bit, but not especially, right? Even that little, and again, hell of a lot of porn of May, like a lot of the fucking cum-brained coomers were still, she was still popular with that set. So even then, like, the body type variety is valuable. It matters. Besides which, like, a lot of people, I've also seen a lot of women be very excited about Squirrel Girl because, like, oh shit, that's a normal body type. That's a normal body type, kind of like what I have, right? This is a character whose body looks more like something which is, like, conceivably reasonable that I could maintain as an ordinary person in a way that, like, and again, Luna Snow is a K-pop star, right? Like, she comes from the K-pop industry. It makes sense that she would be supernaturally skinny, almost. It would make sense that she has these incredibly long legs, short torso, like slim waist, is very thin, very skinny, like really sort of the highest expression of that particular kind of beauty ideal, because that is who her character is. This is good character design for that purpose, right? But when this is the default, right? When this is the default body type that sort of just gets used over and over again with minimal variation, it creates that kind of brain rot where people will see a person who just looks moderately normal and they'll go, oh my god, she's so different. And it's like, isn't that a little sad? Like, isn't it a little sad that people have sort of had their expectations twisted and distorted to such an extent that they see a normal person and they go, holy shit. That really shouldn't be the case in art, I think. I think people shouldn't, like, people who've been playing video games for 30 years who will look at the fucking Witcher 4 trailer came out, right? And now, it's a fake controversy. It's not real. It's because these fucking shouty-ass, like, YouTube, like, fucking yelling thumbnail assholes, like, have to have something to yell about every single day because that's the whole point of their business. They've invented it. But there are a whole bunch of, like, shit-ass, dipshit, motherfucker, dumbass gamers who are yelling about, oh, Siri, oh, she looks so ugly now. She looks like a man. She doesn't look like anything. And she just looks like a conventionally beautiful 30-something-year-old woman. She, like, you met her in the street and you'd go like, holy shit, she looks good. But because people have this incredibly skewed, completely fucked up perception that has been shaped by decades and decades of media that just replicates the same extremely narrow, very unattainable and unrealistic body type over and over and over and over again, whether or not that body type even makes sense for the character that it's applied to, you create this, you turn that Overton window so far to one direction that a person with a normal body and a perfectly ordinary body weight who isn't fat at all shows up in a game like this and everyone goes, oh my god, she's fat. No, she's not! She objectively, literally is not. Right? It gets to me. Like, I think there's something brain poisoning happening with the way that bodies are presented in media. I think it really distorts the way that people even understand what a normal body looks like. And my encouragement to all of you is spend more time paying attention to normal bodies. Like, don't be creepy about it, but, like, look at the people around you. The human beings that actually exist in your life. Pay attention to what their bodies look like. The ones you think are ugly, which, you know, and the ones you think are attractive. All of them. See all of them. Try to see what they actually look like, what their bodies actually look like. And try and dispel this filter that is sort of pulled over your eyes by constant exposure to a monoculture that only has one beauty ideal and insists on only reproducing that beauty ideal over and over again. Because this is a perfectly ordinary-sized, attractive woman. It really shouldn't be exceptional. This is just normal. Anyway, let's talk about Squirrel Girl's character design, actually, because holy shit, she's adorable. I fucking love this character design a lot. So, let me go back to Spider-Man real quick, actually. Because take a look at how Spider-Man's body anatomy is rendered, right? Like, I'm not just talking about, like, the shapes of it, but look at the surface textures, right? Look at how it's chiseled. Look at how, like, all of these, like, hard lines and, like, sculpted surfaces. He almost kind of looks like he's carved out of rock a little bit, right? And that's a thing that's plenty, like, present in plenty of places on, like, the Marvel roster, right? Same thing with Magneto's arms, right? Like, you can kind of see how the way that they're really sculpted out of these, like, hard geometric shapes. In many cases. Same thing with Namor here, right? Like, that sculpting, that, like, really hard edge, like, with these hard surfaces, almost like it's been carved out of flint, right? Squirrel Girl, they make a very specific different choice. She's still in that Marvel Rivals aesthetic, which has these very hard edges and, like, this sculpted feel. But look at the difference in the way that her skin is textured and rendered, right? Like, it's much smoother, it's much softer. This is a specific choice that's being made, is to present her as rounded and soft. And I really like that, because it makes her unique. It gives Squirrel Girl specifically a unique aesthetic, right? That other characters in the game don't have. And that's very good. And that's clearly also a part of the way that they've conceptualized her character. Because Squirrel Girl is a comedy character, right? Like, she's canonically one of the most powerful heroes in the entire Marvel universe. She has beaten Galactus and Thanos. And it wasn't even close. As a jokey joke, but also, like, that is canonically true for real. And so the aesthetic that they've gone for Squirrel Girl's costuming here, like, really is very Disney. Like, there's really, I'm seeing a lot of, like, fucking Rescue Rangers in here, because, again, that's my cultural bias, right? But, like, a lot of softness, a lot of really rounded, soft shapes. Like, the fucking, that she has an acorn belt buckle, and the acorn on both on the sleeve of the arm with the slingshot, and, like, this, like, she has this logo printed on her jacket like that. Like, it's very cute, it's very adorable, it's very Disney costume kind of vibes, right? It's very mascot kind of vibes in the way that it's, like, very printed in that way to be that specific kind of cutesy, to be that specific kind of soft and rounded and adorable. And I really like the fucking Dennis the Menace ass fucking looks almost like a toy, enormous giant slingshot with a little squirrel charm on it, and her little squirrel companion is like, what an adorable character design. What an adorable character design. Also very attractive, but, like, this just looks like a good time on two legs. This just looks like she shows up, everyone's about to have a happy time. Everyone's just about to laugh and feel good and be joyous for a while, because she just looks so sweet and lovely and friendly and fun. Like, instantly, ray of fucking sunshine the moment she shows up. It's just, you can't look at this and not feel a little happy, right? And that's well chosen. Like, those are deliberate things that the character designers have clearly chosen to focus on. Make her soft, make her rounded, make her a little cartoony, make her a little mascot-esque in that vibe. Like, so you really get this sense of, like, oh, this is someone whose job it is to make me feel more cheerful inside, right? Like, it's very good. Like, the fucking pine cones on the sleeves of her fucking jacket. Like, what a wonderful little design feature. Doesn't make a lick of fucking sense as anything practical, right? But as a part of Squirrel Girl's character design, hell fucking yes, man. The fucking the fucking fur lining on the booty shorts and the big chunky adorable shoes. What a great character design. Like, and also the tail. I like the tail. The tail, like, we also saw that on Rocket Raccoon, right? Like, is that they have this tail rig, clearly. Like, they have whatever this physics object is to sort of procedurally generate tail motion. And I like that his tail is big and fluffy too, but on Squirrel Girl especially, it would have been very easy to give her the Playboy bunny tail, right? Like, to give her, like, the little tiny tail that just kind of pops out of the back of her shorts and just kind of sits there, all cute on her butt. I like that it's a big fucking proper-ass squirrel, giant, fluffy, huge-ass tail. Again, soft vibes, right? Like, soft vibes, comfy vibes, pleasant vibes. It's fun, it's cute, it's adorable. I really, really like it. I also like her face a lot. Actually, let's look at one of the costumes here. Because look at the roundness here. Look at how fucking adorable that is. And how pretty it is, too, right? The roundness, the softness of it, right? Rather than, again, the sort of standard face construction that you'll see on, like 80% of the women in League of Legends have more or less exactly the same face, with the same jawline, with the same nose, with the same cheekbones, with the same everything. The fact that she specifically has a broader, rounder, like because acorn, right? Like shaped like a little bit of a nut, right? Like with that roundness, that little bit of that chubbiness in the cheeks and stuff like that. That's it gives a real charm and pleasantness to her that like really aids her character design. And then the big front teeth. They're kind of not super visible when she's just kind of standing around, but like I like the big front teeth. I like that she has the little bit of like the squirrel incisors at the front of her mouth. Like that's fantastic. Like, again, it adds to that sense of cartooniness, right? I think they could have gone a little bigger. Like, I think they could have emphasized the teeth a little bit more, like, so that they just push a little bit over the edge into maybe the slightly the more unrealistic, to really push that adorableness. I think they could have gone a little harder on it, maybe giving her a tooth gap or something between them, things like that. But like, as an element of her character is like, God, that's cute. It's so fucking cute. It's so fucking stinking adorable. It is insane how adorable this character design is. I really, really like it. It just makes me happy to look at. Like, even the nose, like the sort of thickness of the nose bridge and all of that, like, it all just adds to it. That permanent smile on her face. It's just, she looks like a friend, right? Instant friend, immediately. Everyone's friend in the whole entire world. That's what she looks like. Just, what a great character. Like, what an instantly appealing, adorable, wonderful character design. Just pleasant to be in the company of. I really like her. And we also can do a little bit of a color thing here. Like, you can see how much it changes the vibe of her character just to change to cold colors, right? Like, that really changes a lot. Not in the sense it makes her unappealing or, like look like standoffish or anything like that, but it's a very different feeling, right? Like, where this feels more sharp, like more almost fashionable in a sense. Like, this feels a little bit sharper, this feels a little bit more distinct, where this feels like a big warm soft hug just because of all the warm brown earth tones and all of that. Is like, what a good demonstration of like what a color scheme can do for a character design. And then there's the Urban Hunter. This is a striking character. Again, it, like, the first time I saw this, it took me a second. Like, it took me a second where I kind of go, whoa, that's a vibe shift and a half. But then after a moment, I was like, oh no, wait, this fucking slaps, actually. This is actually really cool. Because what it reminds me of, and I'll see if I can try and find her. The trouble is, it's hard to find safe for work versions that I can put on a YouTube channel without getting in trouble. So there's a pinup model from, I think, the 1950s. Was that where she was from? Yeah, she was from the 50s. Called Hilda. Who had like a series of like very popular, very successful pinups that you'd kind of get all over the place. And this reminds me a lot of her in the aspect. This is Hilda. And like the part of the vibe of her, part of the appeal is that she was like a pinup, but also kind of an ordinary housewife thing, right? That it was like, this was not like an impossible glamour model, but something that was glamorizing something a bit more ordinary, right? And I'm definitely getting some of those vibes from the way that Squirrel Girl, like the Urban Hunter version of her here, is constructed. Like, the big sort of elaborate 1950s, like, 40s, maybe? I don't really know periods with hairstyles. Someone in the comments can correct me. But, like, that... Look how much that changes the framing of her face, right? Like, rather than, like, the hair being, like, all the way down, like, framing her face, like, literally outlining and like, creating a frame for it. When you sort of take it out of her face, and then, like, you can do stuff like giving her the big red glasses and things like that. It's, like, there's a lot of personality in that. Like, she looks like she runs a diner where everyone's welcome and everyone always gets a free cup of coffee, right? And, like, you can go there with your troubles and she'll, like, lend an ear. Like, there's a character here. I'm not 100% sure about the jacket. Like, specifically because of, like, the rest of the character design is a lot of, like, saturated red, brown, like, sort of pastel, saturated red, white, pastel blue, like, this sort of, like, 1950s diner aesthetic. I don't know about the shade of space. I kind of feel like if the jacket had been black or white, like, a white leather jacket would have kind of slapped. I kind of feel like that would vibe a little bit more with the rest of the character design. There's something about the bomber jacket being brown and, like... Something about that, to me, clashes a little bit with the rest of the design. But outside of that, like, what a lot of personality. Like, instantly, that's like, okay, that's a person, like... You hang out with her for a bit, you're gonna experience some stories, right? Like, that's the vibe you get here instantly. Just fun. Like, what a fun character. Doing the Rosie the Riveter we can do it pose. Right, and the I think that's an Aviator Girl thing specifically from, so like, very sort of incorporating a lot of sort of like Americana in the way that she's presented. In a way that's like charming and fun and not, you know, what a lovely character. I just really like Squirrel Girl. Like, I think it's kind of impossible not to like her. Like, I think you kind of have to be a little heartless not to be at least a little bit charmed by this. God, what a fun character to look at and talk about. Anyway, Star-Lord. Yeah, he is here. Woo. It's Star-Lord. And honestly, he's pretty boring. And I mean that not in the sense of, like, Star-Lord is a boring character. Well, he's kind of all over the place. I have negative feelings about Chris Pratt, obviously, so I'm very glad that this version of him looks nothing like Chris Pratt. But there is a disconnect for me here with this version of Star-Lord, right? So, if we look at his intro here, right? With the guitar solos and the wow, yeah, wow, right? And his idle animations where he's showing off and he's like doing poses and doing stuff, yeah. And like if you look at, right? Gun spinning and guitar solos and yeah! Because I don't really get much of that from the rest of the character design, right? Like, clearly what we're supposed to take away from about the personality of this guy is that he's a show-off, he's cocky, he's like a guy who, like, spins his guns and goes, woohoo, he's a bit of a bro, maybe, yeah, dude, totally radical, whatever, surfer guy, like, whatever it may be, right? That's the vibe we're supposed to get from him, right? But look at his costuming. Does that really look like the costuming of, like, a sort of flamboyant, wild, you know, arrogant, maybe, like, sort of slightly cheesy, show-offy showboat, braggart? Well, not really. First of all, there's a blue color, right? Like, blue as a color is, like, it's associated with lightning occasionally, but mostly it's, like, water and the sky and calmness and placidness and, like, relaxation and being in control of things, right? There's a reason Raphael was red and Leonardo was blue in the Ninja Turtles. It's because blue is the one that tends to be associated with calm, with control, with, you know, sensibility and placidness. It's the red oni, blue oni thing, right? Think of Kai Kisuke and Soul Bad Guy from Guilty Gear, right? Like, it's that kind of thing. The color blue, and especially when combined with stuff like white or gold, that's the communication of that particular kind of color. It doesn't really say... Right? That's not really the color of that vibe, right? And, okay, fine, like, so he has blue colors, who cares? But the rest of the costume is also just way too fucking boring, right? Like, for how flamboyant, for how much of a show-off, a loudmouth, this version of Star-Lord is supposed to be, he's not wearing anything. Like, it's just a big, like, muscle suit, which is, like, black. and has barely anything going on beyond more blue, like more cold blue light from like his gadgets and these boots that he seems to have just kind of stolen from Iron Man, right? And it's like, I'm just not getting the party vibe. I'm just not getting the holy shit, like this guy's a wild card, he's running around. Like, because the classic way to do that would be with red, right? Like, that's part of the reason why red is a color that's associated with Star-Lord in like a lot of the other media. I'm thinking especially of the video game that came out a couple years back. The Guardians of the Galaxy video game. Like, and the movies, for that matter, have a tendency to have Peter Quill and the version of him associated with red, right? Like, because red is the color of passion, it's the color of fire, it's the color of blood, it's the color of love, it's the color of horniness, it's the color of, like, it's all of that, right? Like, it has that fire inside of it, right? And so, like, red and gold, I think, does a much better job of sort of, like, really selling a little bit of that flamboyant party vibe that the animation clearly wants to sell, that the sound design wants to sell, that, like, that the character's trying to be, in a way that this just doesn't. Like, this looks way too boring to be that kind of a character. And that's really my main problem with Star-Lord. Like, that there is, to me, a really strong disconnect between how flamboyant his character is supposed to be versus how flamboyant he looks, which is really not very much at all. Like, especially on the scale of... Especially by comparison to... fucking Guy Fieri over here. Like, fucking the Lord Mayor God Emperor of Flavortown, who's apparently also in Marvel Rivals. Because, like, this character design, right? Like, instantly, like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Obviously that, yeah, like, with the fucking incredibly silly hair and, like, the fucking fire motif all over his jumpsuit, the asymmetry, that's the other thing, right? Another way of showing that a character is wild, unhinged, unpredictable, that they're not all, like completely locked down, is just simple asymmetry. Asymmetry gives you that impression. So here we have a black gun and a white gun, we have the belt on one side, like, little things like that help create that vibe of someone who's a little bit wild, who's not perfectly put together, but who's, like, always up for a good time, like, whatever that may be. Even the boots here with the red and with the gold on them, they have a little bit more of that, like, oh shit, like, this is a guy who's, like, down to party, right? Where he looks like he's wearing, like, a fucking, like, motorcycle sort of racing leather suit, like, whatever, right? This comports. This comports with that pretty well, I think. But this just feels way too boring. Like, this is way too dour, this is way too cold, this is way too placid, this is way too calm. And I don't really think it fits the character very well at all. Like literally just palette, like, make this one the base costume, and you have improved it substantially. But beyond that, I think there's also just, like, especially the black suit, like, especially this fucking muscle suit is a big part of the problem. Something more flamboyant needs to happen here. Something with a little bit more color, a little bit more life, a little bit more energy. And again, if this version of Peter Quill is supposed to be kind of a careless, show-offy, showboat, dipshit idiot a little bit, right? Who gets in over his head, maybe gets a little bit of trouble. Again, just a little bit of scuff, a little bit of battle damage, a little bit of, like, yeah, he's trying to present himself as this, like, untouchable Star-Lord, yeah. But then you can tell clearly that, like, the symbol on his chest has been badly chipped by some accident that he was in, or, like, something like that. There are things you could do to tell the story of more of a wild card than they actually do. Not much to say about the Guardians of the Galaxy version. Like, this is a movie costume. It's a costume that's supposed to be something an actor can wear for, like, hours and hours a day on a set. That looks, like, reasonably verisimilitudinous with something that, like, not realistic, but something that feels like, oh yeah, that's what people in a sci-fi universe might wear when they're piloting their spaceships or whatever. Not much to say about it. I really am kind of charmed by Guy Fieri here, though. Like, I really, like, if not for the silly hair, right? If not for this fucking, like, my hair is made of fire ass conceit that he's got, like, dollar store Super Saiyan cosplay that he's got going on, I think it would be too easy to take it seriously, right? Like, I think it would be too easy to look at that and go, oh shit, that's supposed to be like a dignified, powerful, like, a little, like, and like, oh, they've kind of missed the mark, right? Like, they've tried to make him look cool, but he's actually kind of looking a little dorky. But because of the hair, you kind of go, oh, no, it's on purpose. Okay, I got it. This is like, we're supposed to find this guy kind of a little bit fun and over the top, right? Which makes the MVP animation a little bit like... Because the MVP animation treats him like he is like a god of the cosmos, right? Like, he flies out of this geometrically perfect arrangement with like a fucking halo behind his head. And it's supposed to be like, this is an angel that has descended down to Earth. And I'm not 100% sure that the vibe of the character design supports that. Because, again, he looks like fucking Guy Fieri. I'm not 100% sure the vibe of the character design supports that, but I guess he's from the comics, so, like, again, Marvel Rivals probably couldn't do that much about it. But he does look absolutely perfect in this one. Like, perfect character design for the purpose. The Guardians of the Galaxy one has a terrible final frame. Like, this is a terrible final frame. Like, compare and contrast with Psylocke. Compare and contrast with like, Magic's alternate costume one. Compare and contrast with fucking any of them. This is really, really, really boring. He's not doing anything. He doesn't even have an emotion on his face, right? He's just kind of like, I have briefly forgotten what I was thinking about. Like, no affect, no emotion, no anything. He's just kind of standing T-posing with his guns pointed in opposite directions, and he's not doing anything. So, like, this I think is really, really weak. Like, this is genuinely kind of like, they should redo that. Like, they need to, like, the intro cinematic that leads to this point is fine, but that final frame is ass. This is, like, I don't know, is this specifically referencing an iconic moment from the movie? I don't fucking know. I still haven't gotten around to watching Guardians of the Galaxy 3. But even if it is, this sucks. This is incredibly boring. He's not doing anything. Nothing's happening. His pose is straight up and down, undynamic, no motion, no anything. This is bad. This sucks ass. It genuinely kind of does. Which, you know, that's all Star-Lord deserves, I suppose, but... But yeah, Star-Lord, he's boring. And now, the goddess Aurora. So when I was doing the original version of this video, I spent a long time looking at her, trying to figure out why I don't like her character design. And I was all over the place. I was like, is it because the sexualization isn't working here? Is it because... I don't know, is it because the way that, like, these boob socks on her chest, and then there's this awkward X thing over them, like these little ribbons, but they don't move anywhere? Is that what is the thing that's the problem with it? And it took me a while, but I eventually arrived at what I think is the reason why I don't really think that this version of Storm's character design works, and it's contrast. Because she also has the 1990s X-Men animated series costume. And, like, the level to which this costume is just better, right? But the question is, why is it better? Why do I look at this and go, fuck yeah, and then I look at this and I kind of go, And it's all down to contrast. So this is going to take a sec. But let me give you a demonstration of what I mean. I'm bringing up Photoshop right now because we need to talk about values. And it's going to take me a second because Photoshop is a piece of shit. And Adobe are assholes, and I hate them. And if I could just quit needing to use their programs for anything ever, I would do it in a motherfucking heartbeat because I hate it so much. Okay, let me just bring Photoshop up so you can see what I'm doing. Let me see. Let's just get this aligned. There, more or less. Okay. So, in art, right? Like let me just gonna make those noises stop happening. In art, there is a concept known as values, right? Like, which you'll see artists talking about a lot when it comes to character design and things like that. And what it basically means is, on a character, right, we have the colors, we have like the color temperatures and all that shit to work with, but underneath the colors always is luminosity, which is the level of light and reflection and the brightness of an individual character design. And the easiest way to check the values of a piece of art is to simply turn off the colors. So I want you to pay attention to what happens to Storm when I turn off the colors. Do you see how little contrast there is anywhere in her suit, right? Like, it even gets to the point that when I turn off the colors, this doesn't look like her skin anymore, right? Like, because there's no real strong identifying contrast to separate her skin from just the suit, right? So there's very low value contrast all the way up and down on Storm here. Now look what happens when we do the same thing to the X-Men suit, right? Like the X-Men 1990s suit. Night and day for difference, right? The color contrast, the value distinction here. Look how it, like, on her arm, for example, here, right? Like this structure there that's running down over there. Absolutely no contrast here. It's just kind of an indistinct gray blob. Boom. Now, all of a sudden, this high value contrast difference creates, like, it outlines the shape of her anatomy, it outlines the shape of her body, it gives her that, like, it makes her striking, right? Like, literally, the instant you see Aurora in this costume versus this one, this is not very striking, right? Like, this is kind of like, oh, it's a bunch of gray. It's not, you don't look at that and go, whoa, holy shit. Like, you're not immediately sort of taken aback or struck, like surprised, or it doesn't really grab your attention either. This, on the other hand, because there's better value contrast, because you have these elements of, like, highlight and darkness much more distinct from one another, this version of her costume, like, it grabs your attention, it strikes you, and it's all down to contrast. It's really not about whether it's white or black, right? It could be red and gold, it could be any color, really. It's about the level of contrast value between these things. I really think that's why this version of her, Storm is one of the most powerful mutants on the X-Men. Well, I mean, power scaling in comics is stupid nonsense, doesn't matter. But, like, she's always been constructed narratively to be one of the most powerful mutants in the world. Like, Omega-level mutant. She's a storm goddess. Quite literally a storm goddess. Like, this woman controls the weather. She can fucking kill you with a thunderbolt. She can throw buildings around, right? And she is the goddess Aurora. Like, when she shows up on the scene, you're supposed to go, oh, holy shit, that's Storm, right? You're supposed to back up a step. You're supposed to, like, instantly, like, sort of like, oh, have to catch yourself and be like, holy shit, she's here, right? This costume just kind of can't do that because the contrast is so low. It's so nothing, right? And there are elements of the costume that are trying to do that, right? We have these lightning bolts on her arm, which are gold, which, like, theoretically should have a pretty good contrast with, like, the dark of the suit. But the thing is, her suit isn't even black. I think if her suit, if, like, the costume parts of this suit were, like, actually black, like, pure black, then, like, you would have that high contrast again, and you would kind of go, oh, holy shit. But because it's these gray tones, right? These gray tones with extremely low differentiation, you just don't get that contrast. Like, look at this lightning bolt design that's supposed to run down her ribs, right? It's kind of barely visible on this costume. But on this one, you can't fucking miss it. Because the value contrast is so much stronger, right? Because it's so much more highlighted on the costume, so you get that lightning motif that sort of, like, demands your attention. Even the same thing with, like, the lightning bolts on her arms, right? Because there is less of a value contrast between the, like, the sort of flat gray and the gold here, this stands out much, much more. This feels much more powerful. This feels much more striking. This feels much more like, you kind of go, whoa, holy shit, right? Like, this feels much more like something powerful has arrived and I need to pay attention right now. This costume just kind of can't do it. It just kind of can't. And I like, that's And that's after, like, I deliberated over it for ages and ages during the initial recording of the video. That's the conclusion that I came to, that it is a contrast problem. Ultimately, because it's not... Sexualization is fine on Storm, because it is that thing of, like, I am a powerful goddess, bow down before me. Like, that's the fantasy, that's the vibe, right? This is a woman who's just so fucking powerful, right? And so fucking, like, owns herself and her confidence. Sexualization and, like, being sexy can definitely be a part of that, but because the costume doesn't pop, it doesn't look that hot either, right? Like, I look at this and it's like, that's not, like, yeah, she's got cleavage and some thigh, but it doesn't really do much. And then I look at this and I kind of go, she's, like, even more covered up here a little bit, because she doesn't have, like, the sort of whatever the stockings are that she's got here. Like, fishnet stockings are supposed to be incredibly hot, right? They are, usually. She doesn't have them here, but because the rest of the suit has that pop, it has that power, I look at this and I go, whoa, mama, right? Like, this to me is hotter. This is just sexier than this is. So it's not about that, right? It's... Yeah, I struggled for a while to figure it out, but I really think it is just down to contrast. And, like, the 90s X-Men cartoon just takes it on this one. One thing I will say, either version, the cape is amazing. Like, this cape is great. Like, the fact that it's, like, hovering there, billowing, constantly animated by the wind in which she's floating is, like, that is striking. That is a powerful thing. Like, that's a thing that really fucking works. And I really, really, really like it. And that's why it's kind of a pity that it's not on the Mohawk Rock version, which is like the 1980s version of Storm, back when she had, like, a punk phase, kind of. I don't think she was ever quite this cartoonishly punk in the comics. I don't think so. I think it was mostly just the Mohawk and, like, I mean, I may be wrong about that. I did not read many X-Men comics ever. I never really saw them in the comic shops when I was a kid. So I don't really know about that, but you can really feel the absence of the cape. You can really feel the absence of this flapping banner and like the strength of the power that has in defining her silhouette, right? You can really kind of feel that in this costume, which is a pity, because, like, I really like the rest of the costume here. Like, I like this sort of, like, 1980s fucking Streets of Rage ass, sort of over-cartoonified, wild punk aesthetic thing that's going on here. Like, it's not authentic punk, like, insofar as anything can be authentic punk, right? Because nothing in a corporate product ever can be, but it's fucking striking. Like, I like the tattoos, I like the side shave, I like the fucking mohawk, like, as a huge aspect of her character, like, just a huge part of her silhouette. I wish there was something. I wish she had, I don't know what you would get that had, like, the punk aesthetic, like a banner, like a fucking anarchist banner, I guess, or whatever. Something that could give her that billowing wind thing. Because without it, she just kind of looks like Superman. Like, she just looks like she's floating with telekinetic powers or whatever, right? She just looks like she's doing generic superhero flight. Whereas this, it looks like, oh, no, she's flying with wind powers, always. Like, this is someone who's manipulating the wind to push herself around. Like, that banner cape is so fucking strong as a piece of character design. And it's a bit of a pity that she can't have it on the punk version. Which, like, I also understand it. Like, again, I don't really know what you would put there. But, like, surely, like, a banner with, like, the X-Men logo, but in, like, a graffiti style or something like that could do it. I don't know. I do wish a little bit that the sci-fi elements weren't there. Like, I do wish that, like, this glow, fucking tech glow nonsense, whatever it is, on her shoulders and on the boots. Like, I like it on the soles. I like it on the soles of the shoes that she has these glowing lightning bolts. That's cool. The rest of it is like, no, it's supposed to be from the 1980s. Like, it's supposed to be, like, 1980s punk aesthetic fashion. It's the tech stuff, I feel, is a little... It interferes with that a little bit more than it adds. But as for the rest of it, like, this is just a fucking killer. Like, I will say, that thing... Like, that metal brace that she's got sitting, like, on her hip, like, imagine if she tries to bend over sideways even a little bit. Like, the way that shit is gonna poke into her ribs. And then this. Like, it is sexy. Like, the point of it is to outline the shape of her buttocks and, like, make her even sexier to look at and stuff. Like, they literally pointing an arrow down the crack of her ass, right? But, like... I see this and I'm like, okay, the shape language is very sexy, but the fact that it's made of metal, right? The fact that this is a metal spike poking directly into the top of her ass, it's like, how does she sit down? That's just, I can't abstract myself from that. This, if they wanted this shape language, maybe it shouldn't have been made of metal, because that to me is just kind of like, that feels a little off. But like, what a fucking hot fucking character design, though. Like, this is another thing, right? So, like, the sexualization, the sexiness, right? This is cool. Like, this is fine, like, with the cleavage down the middle, like, with the little bit of side boob showing up and everything. That's fine. For me, though, the fact that it's a zipper, and she has chosen to unzip it, like, that to me feels sexier. Like, that to me feels more like, oh, she's teasing. Like, that to me feels more like this woman is very intentionally, like, doing this because, like, she likes showing off that way. Like, she likes, like, being sexy in that way. This feels more like a tease. More like an invitation to be charmed, right? Than this does, to me. That's just a personal preference. That's not a criticism of the character design. It's just an observation. But I like that, like, where it's like, I have unzipped it halfway, always comes with the implication we could unzip it the whole way. Like, it's the tease that makes it sexy. Versus, like, this is just a suit, right? Like, which clearly has the cleavage, but it's not the same thing, right? I like the MVP animation pretty well as well. Like, I feel like the camera's pushed in very close to Storm here. I would kind of like it if it had pulled back a little bit more, and it was more like she's hovering in the sky, like, causing lightning bolts behind herself. Like more of weather manipulation rather than just her up close being powerful. But, like, the fucking lightning eyes, right? Like, the calling down a piece of lightning from the sky, and then, like, the lightning eyes, and then doing the douche. That pops. Like, that has a lot of power. Like, that is genuinely very cool. This one rocks as well, though. Like, I like the colorfulness. I like the sort of punk aesthetics that are painted all over it. I like the chromatic aberration. And I like that. Like, her just hovering inside of a lightning bolt for a second like that, like, oh, that is fun. Again, kind of the thing I wish they were doing here a little bit, that we would get, like, this sense of Storm, master of the elements. Because fucking Super Saiyan posing inside a lightning bolt like that is, like, that's, like, ooh, that's the good fucking shit, man. I really like this MVP animation. It's really fucking cool. I also like making her like, white suit, like, X-Men 91, 92 version do that animation. That rocks pretty hard, I think. But yeah, contrast. It's, like, value contrast. It's fucking important, man. Because this should just make this the default costume. Either that, or I would say make the actual outfit, like, make the dark parts of the outfit, make them actually pitch black. So you get that contrast. So, like, you really play up the black and white. So that the gold can really shine against the dark parts of the suit, because it's almost silly how much better the white suit is just because it has that contrast. And that's it. The next one, we only have 5 guys. That just made me hungry. We only have 5 guys to cover in the next one. I don't want to cover them in this one as well, because I've done this video twice now. It turned out 2 hours again. Okay, well, fair enough. So you get a simulation of the experience that people had on Discord. I don't want to do them now. I'll do them in a separate video to finish up. And then, you know, as new heroes are released to the game, maybe I'll do short videos taking a look at each of them individually. Who knows? Or the skins. I don't know. I could probably do that if they put some fun skins in the game. Yeah. Right. I need to do self-promotion. So, if you want to join the Discord, by the way, I sometimes post public join links. It's not paywalled. It's just I don't leave an open invite link lying around anywhere, because that's how you get raiders. That's how you get people, like, for coming and disrupting. So I make random little drops of the join link, usually when I stream, Usually, like, sometimes underneath videos here on this channel, sometimes in community posts, so you don't have to do it to get in. But if you want to get in right now, like, just instantly, with no trouble, there's a join membership button now underneath. Okay, that's an interesting thing for my hand to do. There's a join membership button down there below the video that you can click on, and it's like 99 cents, I think I've set it, is the lowest I could set it to, and that'll get you into the Discord instantly, and you'll get access to the Discord supporter rooms and stuff like that if you want to see me, like, when I do the streams and stuff on Discord specifically. That's there. You don't have to. You can also, like, if you donate on Ko-fi or on Patreon, so long as you have an account on those sites and you connect your Discord to your account on those websites, that will also get you instant access. So it's not just that. But that's available, and I need to also go to crowdmade.com, which is my merchandise website, and say, hello, I have merchandise, this here. It's stuff. I kind of need you to buy... Well, no, I don't need you to buy some of it. You don't need to do anything. But if you want to, I have stuff that you can drink out of a rant that I did about the character design of Kaiser from League of Legends. That is, you can put those words next to your coffee if you want to. I have this shirt, which is basically just a... I just wanted a shirt with... this is a doodle I did years ago, and I've always kind of liked it, so I just put it on a shirt because I wanted it. So you can have that. The hoodies are incredibly fucking comfortable. I've ordered a couple of them. They're just, like, really nice. They're warm, they're soft, they're good, they're lovely. My cats love cuddling with me in them, so you can have that. And other things as well, or none of the things. You don't have to, but, you know, thanks. Bye.